Tonight, on Gloomstation, I'll be sharing with you 3 true stories about teenagers staying home. Sometimes we don't want to be around other people, we don't want to deal with others' drama, or maybe we just don't feel well and want to be by ourselves. But just because we think we're alone, doesn't mean we are. And the people in these stories know that better than most. So find somewhere safe, dim the lights, and listen. When I was about 15, my parents were having a rough time in their relationship. Something I can understand now that I'm older. The arguing was getting more frequent, and I used to avoid it by hiding away in my room playing games online. One Saturday around lunchtime, my parents started arguing, and it carried on all the way until that evening. So as usual, I stayed in my room most of the day. My mom came to me around 6 and said my dad was going to take us out to dinner as a way to get us all out of the house and in a good mood together. I refused, and I asked to stay home since I didn't want to be around them out in public when the arguing started up again. They were reluctant, but they both agreed to let me stay home and go out to dinner and a movie without me. But they left me enough money to pay for a pizza. So I called the nearest pizza place for delivery, and about 20 minutes later the doorbell rang. I answered the door to see the pizza delivery guy waiting for me. He was an older guy, probably my dad's age, and he wore just regular clothing. He didn't look at all like a delivery driver, except for his hat that barely fit on his head. I handed him the money they had given me, and he handed me the pizza. Then he made a comment about not having enough change on him. This wasn't my first time ordering pizza, so I told him not to worry about it and keep the change as a tip. He asked if I was sure, and I said yes. Then he asked if I was going to eat the whole pizza by myself, which I thought was a little strange. So I tried to cover my bases by saying I was going to share it with everyone else. He awkwardly looked past me into the quiet house and said, "It doesn't sound like anyone else is home." I felt that was a little inappropriate, so I thanked him again for the pizza, closed the door, and locked the deadbolt. I decided to watch him through the peephole to see him leave, but he didn't. At least not for a few minutes. He just stood there quietly. He looked like he was waiting for something, maybe for me to open the door again, which I wasn't about to do. But he stood calmly and patiently. Then he pressed his hand to the door and gave a little smile before turning and leaving. That was weird, but it didn't set off any alarms in my head. So I just went back into my room and started to eat the pizza. I'll be honest, I didn't give the guy another thought until my phone rang. I checked who was calling and saw it was the local pizza shop I had just ordered from. Thinking there might have been some kind of mistake, I answered. They told me they were very sorry about the late delivery, and that the delivery person who was supposed to deliver my pizza had been carjacked and robbed. I told them I didn't understand since my pizza had already been delivered. But they told me that wasn't possible, since the driver had been robbed just 2 blocks from the store, and I lived about 10 minutes away. Then the doorbell went off again. I didn't hang up, but I went to the door and looked through the peephole. It was the same delivery driver, and he must have seen my shadow or something through the side window because he said loudly, "Hey kid, I've got your change." I told the pizza place that the guy was back. They first said, "Don't open the door no matter what." Then they said they were calling the police. But the guy at the door wasn't waiting patiently anymore. He knocked a few times and said, "Hey, I gave you the wrong total. This is way too much. Open up so I can give you your change back." I really didn't know what to do, but I wanted him to stay so he could get caught. But then again, I was afraid he'd kick the door in or something. So all I said back was, "Hey, that's okay, you keep it." Through the peephole, I saw him smile and shake his head. Then he touched the door again and said very softly, "No, come on, open up." I didn't say anything. I was too scared by what was going on. Through the peephole, I saw him lean back and his face went from calm and cool to angry. He hit the door harder with an open hand. "Open this door now!" His voice had changed so drastically from chill to fierce that my hand started to tremble. I clutched the phone and backed up. The fake delivery driver tried the handle, which thankfully was locked. "Unlock this door." I again looked through the peephole. This time I could see the vehicle lights behind him. He noticed it too and turned, but not before he did something super weird. This guy took the time to kiss the peephole before running away. I watched the cops chase after him. I just hung up on the pizza place and called my parents to tell them what was happening. They were mid-movie, but didn't hesitate to leave and come home. When it was all said and done, we had the police watch our house for the night. But that guy wasn't caught until 2 weeks later, when he stole another car and delivered another pizza. Turns out the night he was caught, he was carrying a kitchen knife on him that he admitted to wanting to use, and probably would have used on me if the pizza place hadn't called and warned me. Apparently he had worked for that pizza place before, but was fired due to customer complaints about him not leaving after delivering the pizzas. When he was arrested, he said he had a very specific scenario in mind that required him to deliver the pizza first, then get the person to open the door again. He said it was because he was tired of people treating him like nobody. Now I can't imagine what would have happened if the pizza place hadn't warned me, but I'm thankful they did. They might have saved my life. I wish I could say the whole experience brought our family together, but they ended up arguing about whose idea it was to let me stay home alone. That event scarred me for life, and I haven't ordered delivery since, because you never know who is going to come knocking at your door. A few years ago, when I was 14, my aunt came to visit from Georgia. We live in upstate New York, so it was a big deal for her to come visit our family here. My parents decided we would all get together and go to dinner, but I really didn't feel like it because I'd been dealing with a headache for 2 days already, and at any moment I knew it could turn into a migraine. I had stayed home alone before. As a 14-year-old girl, it wasn't something that happened often, but I'd started having migraines more frequently, so they let me stay home when I needed to. That evening, around 6:30, my parents left the house. At about 8:30, I could feel my headache getting worse, so I went upstairs to bed. When I woke up, it was to the sound of people talking downstairs. I figured my folks were home, but when I looked at my phone, I saw my mom had just texted me. Hanging out with B at her hotel. We'll be back later. Sent just 15 minutes ago. I thought maybe they had just stopped by the house or something, so I text my mom back, "Where are you right now?" She texts back pretty quick, "We're at the hotel. Why?" I instantly decided to call her, and as soon as she answered, I whispered that I heard voices downstairs. She told me not to hang up and that my dad was going to call the police. She then told me to quietly lock my door, so I did. I asked her if I should hide in the closet, and I'll never forget what she said. "Do not go in the closet. If they find you there, you would have nowhere to run." That's when it really hit me that whoever was downstairs could do more than just rob us. If I was in the closet, I'd be a sitting duck, trapped and waiting for them to find me. I started to freak out, and my headache turned into a full-blown migraine because of the stress. My mom told me to carefully look outside my window to see if I could see anyone. I checked and didn't see anybody outside, so she told me to open the window slowly in case I needed to climb out onto the roof. The problem was that this window was never opened. I tried to lift it, but it wouldn't budge, and I knew my mom could hear me struggling through the phone, which had to have been torture for her. Then I heard the voices getting louder, and I knew they were clearly coming up the stairs. Coming up to me. "Mom, I need to hide in the closet," I said quickly because I didn't see any other way out. "Stay out of the closet. You have to get out of the house," she commanded. "Is the window unlocked?" And I was in pain, hard, sharp pain that pulsed with my blood pressure. But I looked at the window, and it was still locked. So I unlocked it and very quietly, very carefully pulled the window up, absolutely dreading that screeching sound windows made when they were lifted. Thankfully, the sound never came. Again, I was 14. No child should have to do something like this. And dealing with it while having an active migraine was a literal nightmare. I remember standing by the open window and hearing their voices get louder and louder. They clearly thought the house was empty since our only vehicle was gone. When they tried my bedroom door handle, I immediately started to climb out of the window. I was standing on the roof, barefoot and cold. Then it happened. They kicked the door in and I ducked back. I could hear them laughing at what they had just done, and one of them said, "My daughter isn't even allowed to lock her door. I'd have to kick that in too." I shouldn't have risked it, but I did. I peeked through the curtain to see them, and I nearly gasped out loud when I recognized one of them. He was a guy that worked with my dad. He had even come over once before for a cookout, and here he was breaking into our house. I watched them carelessly push things off my dresser and desk, knock things onto the floor, and dump drawers out into piles. Then they opened my jewelry box, checked it, and stuck the whole thing in their bag. It hurt to see my stuff being destroyed and stolen, especially from someone I knew. The other guy was ripping posters off the wall, while the guy I knew went to the closet. My heart started hammering in my chest, and I felt icy cold when I watched him open it and look inside. I would have been in there, and he would have seen me. I can't imagine what would have happened in that situation, and to this day I thank God my mother had the foresight to keep me out of the closet. Then the other guy started to turn towards me, and I shuffled away from the window out of sight. "Look, she left the window open. It's like they want to get robbed," he said. "Oh yeah, she's going to be in trouble when they find out the window was left open," the guy that worked with my dad said. God, it hurt knowing that he thought that way, that he was already planning to let me take the blame for what they were doing. Then I heard them break something else, and I peeked once more to see them leave the room. At this point, I saw the cop cars quietly roll up in the street. I stood up and waved both arms at one of them. He motioned for me to stay quiet and get down, which I did. Thankfully, it didn't take long for the cops to surround the house and catch the intruders. While I waited on the roof, shaking in fear and cold, I saw the officers escort the two men out of my house, and when one of the cops started talking to me from the ground, the guy my dad worked with looked up and saw me. Even at night, under the dim streetlights, I could see the look of shock and embarrassment on his face before he quickly looked away. This was easily the most terrifying moment of my childhood. And ever since then, I make sure to tell people if they're scared at home, stay out of the closet. I moved out of my parents' house pretty early, since I didn't get along with my new stepdad. This situation happened when I was 19, and lived in an apartment building downtown. It wasn't glamorous, but it wasn't cheap either. I had dodged COVID for the entire pandemic period, and thought it was just going to skip me. I was wrong, and when it did hit me, it hit me like a bus. I woke up on the third day exhausted, cold, and feeling like general crap, so I knew I would need to call in again. My job was very understanding during the pandemic and didn't force anyone into the office. I put on work clothes at first, thinking I could push through, but after getting my shoes on, I was covered in sweat and felt like I was dying, so I went ahead and made the call. I also hadn't eaten the night before, so I had to at least go pick up some drive-thru. Nothing was unusual when I left my building. The air felt nice, but even though it was chilly, I was still sweating. I picked up some food and brought it back home. As a rather small female, my front door stays locked, even when I'm home, as everyone should. And I always lock it when I leave, of course. Well, I came home, put the key in the lock, and when I turned it, I didn't feel any resistance, meaning it was already unlocked. But at the time, I thought maybe I was just so sick I'd forgotten to lock it, which was stupid of me. I went inside and casually looked around my apartment. It looked empty. I sat down at my living room table and ate, then changed into some pajamas and started watching Netflix on the couch. I watched 2 episodes before I felt too tired to go on. I turned the TV off, laid back, and closed my eyes. I woke up to a hand on my mouth. My first reaction was to scream and kick, which I tried to do, but the hand pushed down harder. "Stop, it's just me." I stopped fighting long enough to see who me was. To my shock, it was my ex-boyfriend, the one I dated for just 2 months, over 3 months ago. The one I'd broken up with for being too clingy, desperate, and angry all the time. I knew I looked bad, but he somehow looked worse. His hair was a mess and he had a musty smell about him. I relaxed my face and body so he would move his hand, which he did. I thought you'd finally gone to work, so I came to shower and sleep. I didn't say anything. I was still surprised and terrified to see him in my apartment. It had been a bad breakup, involving a lot of yelling and name-calling. He had weaseled the key out of me, which I had demanded back, but I should have known he would have kept a copy. "I guess COVID hit you pretty hard. Can I get you anything?" he asked calmly. He even looked sincere. "How did you get in here?" I asked, needing to know if I would have to change the locks. He looked ashamed when he told me he had a copy. He started picking at his fingertips, a nervous tic he had. Then he said, "Please don't get mad at me. When you go to work, I shower and I sleep here. But I always dry the shower off and I make the bed so when you come home you never notice. When I saw you were coming back, I didn't have time to leave, so I just hid." To say I felt betrayed and scared would be an understatement. I felt like my bed was dirty, like my apartment was no longer mine. And I knew it wasn't safe to push him, but I had to know how he'd been doing all of this without getting caught. "How did you see me coming back?" I asked, making sure to keep my voice calm and collected. He held up his phone and shook it. meaning he was somehow tracking my phone or he was using some kind of tracker on my car. "You look like you're freaking out. You can't call the cops," he said, and he used a stern tone, one he had gotten way too comfortable using when we were dating for that short time. No, I'm not freaking out. You just surprised me," I said, while internally freaking out. "Can I lay down with you?" he asked out of nowhere. "No," I said immediately, but it just made me more scared because I could tell that hurt him. "I might get you sick." He looked devastated, but he didn't move away at all. Then he said he wouldn't get sick and it would be fine. He even started to lay back a bit. I was physically sick from what was happening, and from literally being sick, but I wanted him gone. "You really should leave. You don't want to get this. It's really bad," I said, trying to use my sickness against him, hoping it would be some kind of bioweapon defense for me. "No, I'm not leaving. I'm tired." His voice was commanding, firm, final. So I did the only thing that made sense for me. I played along. "Okay, you do look tired. Why don't you go ahead and sleep, and I'll go to the store and get us some soup," I told him, trying to seem caring. I made to stand up, but he put a hand on my arm. "You've got soup here. It's in the cupboard by the stove." Now he even knew that. He knew what food I had and where it was. He was way too comfortable in my apartment. "Let's just lay down for a bit," he said, and he laid back while pulling me down with him. The fear was like cold water crawling across my body. I was already shivering from the chills, but now it was combined with fear-induced trembling. "You're shaking. Are you that scared of me?" I was, but I had to lie. "No, I'm just freezing. The sickness is really bad." I was trying my hardest to create some space between us, but he wasn't having it. So we just laid there. He fell asleep quickly, but I was beside him, shivering with chills and fear, wrapped in the arms of a man I left. We hadn't even been that serious. He hadn't seemed like the crazy stalker type, but I guess they never do. I knew I couldn't get him out, so I needed to get myself out. I tried to sit up, but his arm was heavy. I tried wiggling a little bit, but he noticed. "Please sit still. I'm just tired," he said. "I have to throw up," I told him. He barely opened his eyes, looked at me, and shook his head once. "You look fine. Stay." The way he said that was horrifying. He spoke to me like I was a dog. I was a hostage in my own apartment. What I did next was degrading, but it had to be done. I very slowly and carefully put my finger in my mouth and stuck it far enough to the back of my throat that I felt my stomach tighten. I gagged and forced myself to be still so he wouldn't notice. I needed a way out. He knew I was sick. I just needed to be sick. My eyes watered and I pushed my finger back again. This time I felt it coming. I pulled my hair aside with one hand and shoved his arm off me with the other. Then I threw up on the floor. He huffed loudly and sat up. "Jesus, come on." "I'm sorry," I said, tasting vomit and humiliation. But it worked because I was up now. But I couldn't just bolt for the door. I was still weak from being sick. "Clean this up," he told me before he rolled onto his side facing the back of the couch. I started for the kitchen and made a retching sound. Then I ran to the bathroom where I immediately texted 911 with my address, my apartment number, and a message saying, "I'm being kept here by my ex-boyfriend who won't let me leave." I turned the sink on, then gently locked the door so he wouldn't hear a sound. Then I just waited and waited. I was so relieved when I finally heard a knock at the front door. But my ex didn't go to the front door. He ran to the bathroom door and started trying the handle while calling me all kinds of names. I held the door handle tightly and screamed, which was enough for the cops to come in without needing someone to answer the door. They ended up putting my ex in handcuffs before I came out of the bathroom, and I told them everything that had just happened. Luckily for me, he had warrants anyways, so they arrested him and took him away. I haven't seen or heard from him since. My car was cleared of any sort of tracker, and I not only moved apartments, but got a new phone too. Think about who you're with and how they would act if you left them. If that idea scares you, find a safe way to do it now rather than later. And remember that people are dangerous. To everyone out there with a crazy ex, just go ahead and change your locks. Because you never know when they might try and come back home. If you enjoyed these stories, let me know in the comments below. Also, as cliche as it sounds, liking and subscribing really does make a difference. I hope you tune in to the next episode of Gloomstation. Until then, stay safe.